DC's got some great museums, but none where you can live out your wildest rock star dreams. Cleveland's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is where legends come alive. You can even jam out with their house band in their interactive musical experience, The Garage. And don't miss their incredible new SNL exhibit, featuring Will Ferrell's famous cowbell and the complete archive of every SNL musical performance ever aired. Check out the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to learn more about the music that connects us all. Find more info at rockhall.com/exhibitions/SNL-50-years-music. Hey, before we get to today's conversation, I have a favor to ask. CityCast is doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out a lot if you took it. If you took it last year, thank you. We would also be grateful if you took it again, since we can't use last year's data anymore. Please go to citycast.fm/survey to take the survey. It's only 7 minutes long. We actually timed it. That's citycast.fm/survey. When you take the survey, you'll also be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and some cool CityCast swag. That's citycast.fm/survey. Today on CityCast DC. In the 2 days since Trump has announced his takeover of DC's police, I have been so struck by how the city is responding. Yes, there is anger and sadness and fear, but there's also action. Free DC is a longtime advocacy group that's been behind a lot of the fervor this week. And while many people were shocked by this announcement, Free DC has been preparing for this exact moment. That's why I called up a Free DC organizer, who we're calling Joe at his request to protect his privacy, to get into how the group is fighting back, what's working, what's not, and what's next. Today's Wednesday, August 13th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Joe, I know there is a ton going on. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So when most people think about Free DC and the Free DC movement, they're thinking about the fight for DC statehood. Can you briefly tell me what exactly Free DC is?
Sure. So Free DC's roots, it was really started in the 1960s, co-founded by Marion Barry. And basically, it was kind of this movement that was really helping for statehood. But it's really kind of grown since then, grown into this representation and working with other key organizations throughout the city to help work with local migrant organizers to defend rights, helping kind of provide an area where people can go to find information about campaigns in DC, going to key things like won't get into it too much, but the DC Local Funds Act certainly was a big push to get people to understand about that. So it's really kind of grown from this organization back in the 60s to representing DC throughout the decades, and is now especially focused with what's happening throughout the city, supporting different migrant organizations, different mutual aid organizations to be a place to help your average citizen in DC be able to fight for their rights and support key organizations.
We are talking just 48 hours after Trump deployed the National Guard and announced a federalization of MPD. What have you all done in that time? Did you feel prepared for this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it was almost humorous if it wasn't such a serious topic. We expected this for a while. Obviously, we're hoping against it. But we've been preparing for this for a while, especially over the last, little over 6 months. We've been already working on capacity building to make sure we have teams in place, to make sure we understand, to make sure that we're engaging community members, getting consistent feedback on what they're feeling, on what they need. The second this was happening, we were able to jump into action. I don't think it's surprised that certainly anybody in the activist space or certainly anybody who's been watching.
What have you all done since this announcement came down?
So I'd say specifically over the last 2 days, it's been a lot. What we've been doing has been going more and checking in with the communities, going around making sure people feel trained, people feel safe, providing educational resources to folks as needed to make sure that they feel safe in what they're doing and understand their rights when faced with any law enforcement officials. Some of it includes things like cop watching, which is pretty well-known thing. FreeDC does provide public trainings on it, and it can be seen on the website. And there's also other organizations that do the same thing. But yeah, like how cop watching, I guess, fits in is because it's meant to, especially in this moment where now we have federal officers, ICE, HSI, others coming in who don't necessarily actually know DC laws. It is important to especially make sure to follow them and showcase, especially their interactions with the community. And this isn't anything that's, wild. We're not going up and shoving a phone in an officer's face.
How exactly are you all coordinating when you go watch cops?
It is just really instructions to be like, hey, if something's happening, please record. Let's see what these officers are doing, and in a way that is really trained, where people are trained to step back, not get in the way. They shouldn't be generally filming any person who's being questioned or a detained person's face without the permission. They will actively, potentially ask that person's permission. Be like, hey, is there anyone you want to contact? Anything else? And also letting the people who know what they're doing, like My Good Solidarity Mutual Alliance, the hotline, DC Safety Squad, just letting people who really know what exactly to do when they see this, so that they can jump into action. We're able to coordinate amongst those and make sure that they're spread out throughout different parts of the community throughout DC, especially in areas that are well known to have ICE in the past and in the very, very recent present.
Are you tired of yelling at your podcast app? We know CityCast listeners don't just consume local news, you live it, debate it, and have opinions that could reshape the conversation. Now you can do something about it. CityCast DC has partnered with Backroom to turn your hot takes into real impact. This is not just another comment section. Backroom works by bringing people together in focused discussion rooms where engaged residents like you dig into local issues, challenge each other's thinking, and actually build towards solutions. Think of it like group chat meets collaborative journalism. And right now, all of Backroom's current rooms are open for you to join. If you've ever wanted to keep the conversation going after a CityCast episode, this is your chance. Help shape solutions for your neighborhood, your block, your city. Head to the link in the show notes to join an active room or start your own. Backroom, a platform for problem solvers. Hold up, DC foodies. You're still ordering the same boring takeout? It is time to wake up those taste buds and explore DC's unique and delicious food scene. Metropolitan Washington Restaurant Week is bringing the eats from August 18th through the 24th at hundreds of locations across the DMV. Check out that new Thai fusion spot or that burger joint you've been meaning to try. There's something for everyone. Enjoy a 3-course lunch, dinner, or DC's favorite, brunch, at a discounted flat rate as low as $25. If you've ever eaten out in DC, you already know that it's an absolute steal. Many locations are also offering cocktail and wine pairings to further elevate your dining experience. Restaurant Week is presented by the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington and Events DC. Visit rwdmv.com to see the full list of participating restaurants, peruse the menus, and book your reservations.
Got any fun trips coming up? One thing you probably haven't put on your packing list is learning the language. But with Babbel, you can start talking in just a few weeks. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. And I also just persuaded my friend who's going to France this fall to learn French with Babbel, but that is another story. Babbel's extremely fun and intuitive. It's like having a private tutor in your pocket. Handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel's lessons are voiced by real native speakers and built with science-backed cognitive tools and interactive features to fit any learning style. I love a lot of the different Babbel features. The Babbel games for sentence building, Babbel's speech recognition, which helps me get the pronunciation right. And now I'm really into Babbel's word of the day, which greets me on the homepage of the app. Every day, a new word revealed like a little surprise with a sentence to help contextualize it. It's like a daily treat for me. Studies from Yale, Michigan State, and other leading universities continue to prove that Babbel works. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Look, I want you to learn another language. So I'm teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
What does the coordination around cop watching look like, and how do you see it helping?
So we coordinate through especially more encrypted channels to ensure the safety of all those involved. If you could imagine, scheduling folks to kind of make sure that we have areas covered, especially during times where there might be a lot of people around or during vulnerable times. Like we know, for instance, and this is pretty public information, that a lot of ICE activity and also law enforcement activity has often happened in the mornings or evenings. So making sure during that time that people have coordination to try to keep the community as safe as possible during those times.
One of the questions I've been getting from folks in my own community is around protest, right? I think that any time that the president is talking about a show of military force in a civilian city, people are concerned about what that means for protest. And yet, protest is one of the tools of resistance that we have in our toolbox. So how have protests been being used as a tactic in this movement? And what do you say to somebody who is thinking, wow, lots of federal law enforcement in the city, I don't really feel safe to protest. Should I actually be protesting right now?
I'll actually answer, I guess, the last part first. If you don't feel safe about protesting, that's pretty understandable. There is an anatomy of a protest. There's a lot of different ways to really support movements. You could be finding information online, talking to people in your community, finding educational information, especially cutting through all the myths and disinformation that's everywhere all the time now, and really working to do it in a place that you're comfortable with. And those are tools available. Those the organizations I mentioned previously are really good at engaging folks in a way that they feel safe. And one thing that Free DC does is we've worked and talked to different organizations around the country to come up with best practices about dealing with protests. Like, I guess good examples are protests that have especially been recently over the last few months is making sure that community members are aware it's happening, making sure that they're ideally in places where people feel safe. We don't want a huge protest in an area where it might bring people a lot of harm, and especially in vulnerable communities. So educating people a lot on that and making sure people feel safe and understand what's happening in their community around protests are quite key to what Free DC does. As far as protests themselves, there was obviously the key one that Free DC was involved with yesterday by the White House. There was one on 14th Street. I know there was several people watching that to make sure things were okay. I'd say protests are kind of key because we need to really show what people in DC are going through. It needs to be a good outlet, but it is also just one of the tools that people can use. There's a lot more tools people can use in the anatomy of a protest.
Yeah, I want to get into that because I am a longtime activist organizer. I spent many, 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 many hours of my life on the front lines of protests. When Trump took office the second time around, I remember thinking, is protest effective? Is anybody listening? We've had huge demonstrations against Trump in this country. And sometimes I feel no matter how big or well organized they are, no matter how big of a show of the will of the people they are, I don't know that people in power are actually listening. So if that's the case, what are some of the other ways that are not just standing out in the streets as a part of a protest that folks can really push back?
In terms of what people can do, what we've really been recommending people to do is start working within your own community, work to keep people safe. There are resources that are really helpful. Like I mentioned them earlier, Migrant Solidarity Mutual Alliance has a hotline that people can call any hour of the day to report, and they will send people who are educated. You can work with your neighbors to come up with specific emergency plans if something is going on. And there are people who will help you create those plans through Free DC, through Solidarity Mutual Alliance. You can report things to the DC Safety Squad, who are really good experts here. You can really work within your community to keep each other safe, especially in this time where we have people pouring into DC who don't understand the community, who don't understand the intricacies. There's a lot you can do really hyperlocally on your street, in your neighborhood. These exist, and people can find them, and people can work together. And that is something that is very useful. to be able to keep people safe and yourself safe.
When it comes to exerting pressure and really leveraging this moment, how much can movements like Free DC actually do?
I'll speak just for myself, of course, in this case, but I think movements like Free DC can really do a lot, especially for hyperlocal DC. It feels very big at times, especially if you start considering the wider DMV community, but it's also very small. One thing we can really do is teach people the basics, understand that if, what do you do if ICE shows up on your door? We can just teach people really understanding, which is that like, one of the big things we always tell people is don't play in the tactics that are designed to make you panic. And I say this knowing full well that communities throughout DC have tenuous relationships with the police, often at best. There's current day and historical examples of things still going wrong when people and police not listening necessarily to the law. But it's panicking is the easiest way to incriminate yourself, even if you're totally fine. And so it just the very basics of learning people can learn to protect themselves, learn that they actually have a lot of key rights. And so whether it will take a national chain that'll lead to national change and national policy change, especially with this current government, it's hard to say. But I can tell you that this hyperlocal protection is useful and has already saved people throughout the DMV.
Have you all seen like a surge of interest and folks interested in working with Free DC or interested in what Free DC is about? Or in this moment, are people sort of shying away? Just what are you all seeing?
There has certainly been a surge of interest. You have lots of people signing up, lots of people interested in trainings, and, Free DC and others try to really go around all 8 wards to make sure that everybody is represented, that we have local leadership who can work and continue to deal with this surge of interest and make sure people get training so that everybody is safe. But I've also talked to many people who, are scared, and that's fair. It's a scary time, and it's hard to tell someone who's scared that, hey, this is a time to stand up.
So tell me about what's happening at 8 p.m.
This, I admittedly was not personally involved with this, but it was something I was seeing during the chats, and it's kind of a point to just show people like, yeah, we're angry, and you should be angry too, because basic human rights being lost, basic community representatives are no longer controlled by the community, and we should be angry. And we've seen this in movements around the world. It's also just therapeutic to also hit some pots and pans together and, be a little showcase that it's okay to be angry and here is a good outlet. And I enjoyed, at least, I think it is a good way to show like discontent throughout the city.
The public act of going out on the street and making noise and banging pots and pans, I really associate that with COVID, what we did when we were all stuck inside. Why do you think this is worth doing now?
It's fair to look at this and be skeptical. I don't think anyone's been ousted because some people banged some pots together. But what's really more important about this is because people are going through really stressful times. People are worried. Like there's people who know people who were snatched up and not in legal ways. And people can also in this time feel very alone and be really unsure. And it's hard to suddenly be like, oh, okay, moving into a movement, learning this, learning that. But it's something like this can really show actually that you're not alone. This is a community together. If you hear pots and pans ringing throughout the street, it shows people who are together and who are annoyed and discontent with what's happening. That type of thing is not here to bring down, and stop what's happening. But it is here to help showcase that people can be together. And those people are closer than you might think.
I think we have this idea that meeting this moment for everybody means going out into the street, risking arrest, protesting on the front lines. And as you were saying, there's so many ways that people can be involved. There's so many ways that people can push back. I think the one that we see images of and footage of often is protest because it can be sort of a big flashy flashpoint. But how you choose to show up in this moment does not need to be as flashy to be effective, and also to be the thing that actually utilizes what you're good at, right? Like not everybody's skill set is protesting in the street. Some people might have other things that they might be better at exerting.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people who can't stand for hours. There's people who we know are surviving on jobs where they have low pay and they can't do this stuff. But there's a lot of things. If you have money to donate, it can be donated. If you have materials that can be printed, that's very useful. One of the biggest things I've always told people and see is people just also need to have hard conversations with others, and people need to talk within families, within friends. This is how real change occurs. A lot of these talks is what make a difference. I had to explain to someone yesterday who was like, no idea what was going on in DC, and there quite a little bit of patience to talk to said person because it's been going on for a while. But those are where real change can happen, right at the grassroots level. You don't have to be out there holding a sign, but you can make just as much difference talking to people in your community, helping, just showing support, donating money, or anything else.
I know that ICE picked up around 15 people on Tuesday at the Home Depot out in Northeast, workers and customers. Are you expecting to see increased ICE enforcement as well as this new Trump announcement? And if so, how are y'all preparing?
Unfortunately, we do expect things to continue ramping up. As I said earlier, people can follow Migrant and Solidarity Mutual Alliance, amongst other places where you can really see photos of things coming out on a daily basis of increases. Now with the local police under more federal control, bringing in federal agents, we really expect this, or at least it is likely to increase. In terms of how we're responding to this, we've really worked to amp up and do constant community support to making sure that we are training people, like we do active bystander trainings. We do issues to teach people how to properly watch law enforcement and document what's going on. And we've been increasing across the district, certainly focused on areas that we can consider hotspots, like very popular areas. Like we know, like on last Friday alone, we had ICE HSI, which is also ICE, in Columbia Heights, Mount Pleasant, Fort Totten. We expect this to really increase, and we're going to be working to increase Free DC and other supporting organizations reach throughout DC to keep people as safe as possible, and ideally kind of continue to ramp up efforts to keep people safe.
There are so many groups trying to protect DC from Trump right now. There's groups like Defend DC, Refuse Fascism. To what extent are you all working together?
So Free DC does have a long history of trying to work with different organizations, the different ones I've mentioned. We're trying to really kind of recognize that getting everyone to work together is how we actually get the most power possible to meet the moment, to protest together, and to support people and keep our communities safe. For Free DC, it's hard to speak entirely to all the specifics that have been done, but there are different organizations we've worked with. Most have been these organizations that are very local nonprofits or networks that have been working together. There are other actors, as mentioned, that do work more independently, that Free DC has either tried to engage with in the past, or there are some differences in terms of approach. But we do try to work as much as possible together with different organizations.
That's good to know. And I mean, as with my own experience in the activist and organizing scene, I know that sometimes it can be fragmented. Sometimes it can be sort of decentralized, or we used to say, oh, we're a leaderful movement, not a leaderless movement. And people would kind of roll their eyes. I wonder, do you see the sometimes fragmented nature of the activist and organizing scene in DC as a problem when it comes to a coordinated response?
Yeah, I think it's a fair thing to say it is occasionally a bit of a problem. It's certainly something that's popped up over the last couple of months as, you know, there's different ways to approach a protest, different ideologies, and that has occasionally created an issue, but we still try to work through it to make sure, because, you know, we still have this final goal and of, you know, making DC a state, of making sure people are safe. But overall, it has the response, I'd say at least overall, especially from my experience, has been pretty good at being unified and quite good at bringing people together and doing it in a way that is ideally safe, and also calling out when other organizations are not doing it in a way that invokes best practices around protesting.
We started out our conversation talking about Free DC's goals for statehood. Where does statehood even stand right now? Like, where is that conversation what's the conversation around that at the moment?
I'll say that the priorities right now, we're just trying to keep people safe. We're just trying to make sure our community can go outside and not feel threatened. So that is probably an immediate priority. But like where that conversation stands, it's still something we're pushing. It's still something we're trying to get people around the country to understand that, if we cross a bridge into Virginia, those people there have more rights than us. But it's still going to be really hard. I was chatting with people a couple months ago who had been talking to, there was a bill up in Congress. They went to senators and representatives from different states asking them to please don't vote on this. Please do this. This is it's important for DC. And those senators and representatives were like, you don't live in my state. Go talk to your representative. And of course, our representative doesn't have voting power. So it's dealing with the basics and just really trying to be like, okay, we need to focus on the now, but we need to always keep in mind the goal that DC is a place that is underrepresented, that doesn't have the rights that the rest of the country does, and that needs to change.
In this moment, how should DC residents be protecting themselves? Like, are there resources that can help folks educate themselves on their rights or how they might do a better job of protecting their neighbors?
Absolutely. And they're pretty widely available from really excellent organizations. Free DC has public orientations that will also go into the history of DC. People really need to understand that home rule, hasn't been around since the founding of the city. There's also those trainings I mentioned earlier, active bystander trainings. Learning how to cop watch is a really important one. I mentioned also people, if they're able to just protect their communities and people by calling hotlines. Migrant Solidarity Mutual Alliance is one of the best for DC. They have info and they can send people really easily looking into the DC Safety Squad. There's a lot of resources for people who are looking for risk action plans. If businesses are really concerned for how this might affect their employees, all those organizations I just mentioned are really good in providing what people can do, providing educational information to showcase how people can protect themselves. These resources exist. Many are online, but those are really good organizations to start who are reporting daily on Instagram or Blue Sky or other places that are really good for people to start to kind of learn how to protect their communities, how to protect their neighbors, and how to protect themselves.
What is coming down the line for Free DC?
I think in the short term, it is really kind of continuing what we've talked about, which is working to make sure people understand what this means. The situation is changing by the second. Really making sure that people can learn how to document and protect their community members. But then there's also the understanding that we can't do this necessarily forever. We want to work with businesses, with nonprofits, houses of worship, so many other places to ideally get them trained, have them working with other companies and businesses and nonprofits together so that they're ideally in the long term, there is a sustainable network where when things change, there can be this thing already in place to let people know immediately, to let information and correct information certainly get out to as many people as possible in a sustainable way.
Joe, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all you're doing for the city.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and keep doing what you're doing. CityCast is great.
Today, we've got a couple of shout outs from CityCast DC neighbors. Raul J. wants to show love to Cuckoo in Columbia Heights. They serve delicious Iranian food, it's reasonably priced, and has a warm and welcoming atmosphere, which is something I know we all need right now. Maggie W. is sending a huge congrats to Bill at Revelers Hour for fully taking over the best pasta spot in the city. Can confirm they have a corn ravioli there that will knock your socks off. Revelers rules. And Michelle K. is shouting out the spot that she got her very first jumpsuit, Fia's Fabulous Finds, a small consignment store packed with great finds. Thanks for not gatekeeping, Michelle. We've also got two brand new CityCast DC neighbors, Kelly H. and Kathleen P. Thank you so much for joining. Thanks, Raul, Maggie, Michelle, Kelly, and Kathleen. Want to share your favorite local business or nonprofit on the podcast? Just become a CityCast DC neighbor and send us your shout out. We'll read it right here. Join today at membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm. That's all for today here on CityCast DC. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Please stay strong.